Hi, Jason from Motion Caddy here. In this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to recreate this Fiverr logo animation. So it should be a fun one to recreate. To begin with, I've created a new composition with a green background layer matching the original. If you wanted to use the exact same colour, then here is the values, so you can copy that into your own. I also did a quick search and found a font that is pretty close to the font they used for the logo. It's called Chunk 5. It's not identical, but I will share a link below where you can download it for free. If that link no longer works for whatever reason in the future, then I may remove it to prevent the confusion. So if the link is missing, then that will be why. But if you just do a simple Google search for Chunk 5 font, then you should be able to find a free download somewhere. So now in our composition, I'm going to type the word Fiverr. And I'm just going to center that. This isn't the one we will be animating. This is just for reference of positioning and size. So I'm just going to adjust the kerning slightly. Let's bring these in. I'm just holding Alt on a Mac and Option on a PC, I think, holding that and then using my left and right arrows just to bring in the individual kerning. All I'm going to do now is duplicate this layer and then delete the I, V, E and R, just so we have just the F. And on the layer below, I'm just going to press T on the keyboard to bring up our opacity, turn that down to 20, and then make this a guide layer just so it doesn't render if we forget to turn it off later. And on the F, I'm just going to move that across to the F. This guide layer is just so we know the final positions of our letters and where we need the F to start, as it does wipe across all letters. We don't want to accidentally start here, for example. We need to make sure we do start further across than that R. So I'll just put that back to here. And then on this F, I'm going to press P, then holding Shift, press S and R. And actually, before we do anything here, I'm going to press Y on the keyboard to bring up our anchor point tool. And I'm going to drag the anchor point to the center of our letter. Make sure snapping is ticked up here, and it should jump to the center while you're dragging. This is just so it rotates around the center rather than where it was, which was down here, or wherever your anchor point may be. And then I'm just going to move forward to roughly 19 frames, 20 frames, and I'm going to do a position keyframe. Then let's just move back to roughly 11 frames, and I'm going to move this position to the end of the word Fiverr, to roughly here. And then near the beginning, or even at the very beginning, that's where I'm going to move this down to here, to where it will scale up and rotate out from. You will see that this is creating a curve. We want this to be straight and linear. So if we highlight all three keyframes, right click, go down to keyframe interpolation and change this second drop down to linear and click OK, that should be straight. There you go. So we want it to start here, move up to here, and then across to the finishing position here. Although what we do actually want is it to stay in this position just for a bit while the rotation sort of comes from 90 degrees round. If I just bring our example back and just skim through, we'll see that the F it rotates up and then it stays in its position just for a beat while that rotation finishes, and then rotates back the opposite way, ready for that next move. So it does need to stay in this position just for a bit. So I'm going to copy this keyframe. Let's actually put it in place of this keyframe. So I'm just going to move that one across and paste this keyframe. So between these two keyframes, nothing should happen. And there we go. So let's just play that, move up, hold, and then across. Okay, it's not too bad. So I'm going to, on this first keyframe, or second keyframe I should say, let's do a keyframe for scale and rotation. And then let's scrub back to the beginning and let's do our rotation at 90 and our scale at 0. So now if we play this, it will rotate round and scale up from the bottom. Although we don't actually want the rotation to finish at this point, do we? So what we do want is for that to rotate further than we want, and then between these two position keyframes we want it to go around the other way. At that point, it will move across to the end. Obviously, there's no easing at the moment, so it's very linear and robotic. We will add some easing in a bit, but let's just get this move correct to begin with. What I want is just before it gets to this last keyframe, which I'm just going to drag back just so it's a bit quicker. I might drag all of these across actually. Just tighten these up. And just before this final position keyframe, I'm going to do a rotation keyframe. And then 2 frames after, so it goes rotation keyframe, 2 keyframes to our final position, another 2 keyframes, and then let's go and do an opposite rotation to say -25. And let's go forwards a few more frames. We can adjust these later, I'm not sure exactly how this will look. A few more frames and then 0. So these might be a bit too close to each other. Let's just move them out slightly. So now it's 3 keyframes, 3 keyframes, and then what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 keyframes. When we add some easing, we will most likely adjust these again. That is our main movements, I think, for this start. So let's just select all the keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, and let's just do an easy ease on all the keyframes. Let's go to our graph editor by clicking this button here. If yours doesn't look like this and it looks a bit more like this, that's because you have edit value graph selected rather than speed graph. So click this button here and let's go to edit speed graph. And if we just click and drag over a set of keyframes, we can adjust the speed. So let's just drag that in, select these ones, drag them in. Let's just bring that out a bit. Them in. So for now, let's just go through and make sure everything has a bit of ease in. So basically, when the graph looks like this, it will start slow and go really quick and then slow down again. So let's see how this looks. Yeah, no, I think that's about right actually, isn't it? So what I might do is, in this position, I might just have a bit more ease in into this final position. I actually think that was better before, so let's just grab this final position keyframe and have it so it's a lot steeper closer to the keyframe, just so it comes to an abrupt end rather than easing into its position. And that's looking good for the F. So we're going to add an inertia expression to the position and rotation. So if you go to motioncaddy.com/expression/inertia, I will link it in the description, so you can just click on that and go straight to this page. But if you go to this page and scroll down to here, you will see that there is an expression. So if we copy the entire expression, copy, go back to our After Effects and on position, hold Alt on a Mac or Option on a PC and click on the stopwatch to open the expression box and paste that expression in there. And let's do the same on rotation. Open up our expression box, paste and click off. Let's just see how that affects it without altering any of the expression. It's not too bad. The position seems to be bouncing back a bit too much. So I'm just going to, in our position expression box, I'm just going to play with some of these top 3 lines. These are the only 3 lines you need to worry about. So I'm just going to change this from 0.05 to 0.15. See how that looks. Okay, it's not too bad. It's got a weird jiggle at the end, so I'm just going to turn the frequency down to say 3. Okay, I might come back and adjust this later. So what I've done is amp 0.15, frequency 3 and decay 7. So What I will do actually is just copy this whole expression, close that box, and then paste that same one into the rotation, and click off, and see how that looks. And that'll do for now. We can always come back and adjust these later. So let's move on to the next letter. I'm just going to use the text box tool to type I. It should stay the same size as the F. I'm just going to drag it down to cover the I of our reference. I'm just going to move the anchor point back to the center. What we'll do actually now is just duplicate the I to create a V, E and 2 R's. So I'll duplicate that 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just move these into roughly the correct position. So V, E, R, and the final R. I'm just going to use the arrows on my keyboard to position these on top. There we go. And I'm just going to turn these off, just so we have the I. And with the I, with the animation right at the end of all our keyframes, I'm going to use this pick whip and pick whip to our F. So now that I will follow everything the F does. If I just bring back our example, we'll see that the F moves along, and when it gets to its far left position, that I slides out from inside the F. So at here, the I will start coming out, and about here on our final keyframe is where it will come to its final position. So I'm going to press P on the keyboard on our final keyframe, and on the I, going to create a keyframe for position. And then back across to here, I'm going to move that position just so it sits inside the F, or as best we can inside that F. So I'm just going to zoom in, and about there, and I'm just going to drag this across just so it starts at that point, so anything before that we can't see. So if it's not perfectly inside, it doesn't matter. We will only see when it's on its way out. And on these position keyframes, do an easy ease, back to our graph editor, and we want it to shoot out from the F reasonably quickly, so I'm going to drag that to the left, and then the right keyframe I'm going to also drag to the left, just so it has quite a bit of ease in and slows down to its position. Let's just see how that looks. Let's just zoom back out. Okay, yeah, that's not too bad. You would have noticed that in the example, in the Fiverr animation, there is a connection between this top cross of the F and the top of the I. So what we're going to do is zoom in, go to our rectangle tool, and just draw a rectangle to cover that space. Just like so. You can come in, select it. Does look like it's a bit too wide, so let's just do that, bring it down, back up. Okay, that's fine. And again, I'm going to press Y on the keyboard and move this anchor point right to the left. That's just so it scales from this position. And let's go to here, which is the final keyframe on both our I and F. And on our shape layer, press S on the keyboard, keyframe the scale, across to the first keyframe on our I, and on that scale, let's turn off the proportion constraint, and then scale down our first number to 0. We have forgotten to pick whip this, so let's just move our cursor right towards the end and pick whip this shape layer to our F as well. Let's just rename this I cross. Not sure what to name that, but that should be fine. Let's just see how that works. That works okay. What we do want is some ease in. And what you want to do is just a very similar graph to what you did on the eye. So quick at the start and slow at the end. Let's zoom back out and let's see if that works. It does. So there we go. You may have to adjust this slightly just so in case you accidentally see a gap or anything during the animation, you just may need to adjust that graph just to make sure that you don't ever see a gap. But again, let's drag the start to that first keyframe just so we don't see anything before. Let's even bring it down to above our eye. And there we go, and that's the first two letters done. We will do the dot at the very end because in the example you will see that dot flies in the air. There. So we'll do that at the very end. We'll do all the letters first. So for now, let's just leave it as it is. And then actually let's bring back that example and see how the other letters animate on. You'll see they all, as the F crosses their path, they come in from the bottom, slight rotation, and sort of land with a nice bounce before that final dot of the eye lands in its final position. So this should be a matter of doing it once on the first letter and then copying and pasting those keyframes to the others. So let's start with that final R, which we already have. Let's just make sure that anchor point is in the middle. Let's bring up keyframes of our F, pressing U, just so we have reference of where it is. So let's go P on our keyboard and do a keyframe. And let's go down, and we want to move our R down to here. So bounce up and land there. We also want to do the rotation, so I'm going to hold Shift and press R, keyframe the rotation. And let's actually do scale while we're at this point, so hold Shift, press S for scale, back to that first keyframe. Let's rotate this round to say 60 and do scale down to 0. Let's just scroll across quickly, see how that will look. Yeah, it looks about how it should. Might move these keyframes across. We won't know for sure until we add that inertia expression, so what I'm going to do is just copy and paste from our F position and then hold Alt or Option and click the stopwatch on the R's position and paste it into there. Let's just see how that looks as it is. It's not too bad actually, it goes a bit too high. I don't think it needs to go as high as that, so I'm going to go into our expression. I'm just going to drop the amplitude to let's say 0.07, just so it doesn't go as high as it was there. But other than that, I think that's working how I would like it. It's got a nice bounce to it. The timing might be off slightly. No, it's not too bad. Okay, so I'm going to copy this expression and I'm going to hold Option or Alt, click the stopwatch and paste into the rotation of that R. Yep, okay, so I think that's working. So what I'm going to do is, with my time indicator at the first keyframe on the R, I'm going to click on position, the name itself, hold Shift, click on scale and rotation, so all three are selected. I'm going to copy, turn on this R, and firstly I'm just going to move that anchor point down to the center. And with that layer selected, I'm going to paste. And if we just go to the second set of keyframes, you'll see that it does finish in the same position as the R, and that is because we copied the exact position. So we do need to select both the position keyframes, either by dragging over both or clicking on the word position itself, and then moving that across back to where it needs to be over that first R, about there. And now it's got the exact same animation as that first R. We will stagger this later, so it goes from right to left. But for now, I'm just going to copy again these keyframes. Go to E, turn this on, anchor point in the center, and paste. Press U on the keyboard to bring up all the keyframes. Go to the last keyframe, select both position keyframes, and move it back into its correct position. I'll go back to the first keyframe. I'll turn on our final letter, which is the V. Make sure that anchor point is in the middle, and paste those keyframes again. Press U on the keyboard, go to our final keyframe, select both positions, and move it back to its correct position. Now if I played all of those through, you will see they have the exact same keyframes and bounce, which is what we want. But if I was to select all these layers, and let's just drag that to the start just so we can't see them before. And with them all selected, I'm just going to press U just to collapse the keyframes. I'm just going to stagger these in the timeline by 1 frame each. So we want the first R, or the R furthest right, to start here. 1 keyframe along, we want the next R to start, so I'm just going to drag that to the right. You can use the square bracket on the keyboard to make it jump to the wherever your time indicator is with it selected. So let's go another keyframe forward and click on our E and have that start here. 1 keyframe forward, select our V and have that layer start here. Now if I play that through, you'll see each one starts 1 frame after the first. So these look a bit slow, so I'm going to highlight all 4 and press U. And I'm just going to have 5 frames between the first and last keyframe. So to make sure my time indicator is on the first keyframe of that R, I'm going to go forwards 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 keyframes. And with all the final keyframes selected, I'm just going to drag them across to here and then see how that looks. That looks a bit snappier to me and a bit nicer, so I shall leave it there. Okay, and that's all those letters done. So let's take a quick look at the dot of the I. So what I'm going to do is just move the time indicator to the end so it's in its final state. And then the shape layer tool, we'll click and hold and grab the ellipse tool. I'm going to zoom in. I'm just going to draw an ellipse, the rough size of that dot. So that looks pretty good to me. You can come into your contents ellipse path and you can change the size and position just to try and get it exact, but mine looks quite good there. Let's just call that dot. Let's turn it off for now and go to our eye. And again with this shape tool, I'm going to go back to rectangle tool and make sure the eye is selected. Let's even just solo that layer. I'm going to use this shape tool to draw a mask around just this bottom section. Unsolo. And you will see now that eye no longer has a dot. So let's turn on our dot that we just drew. Make sure that anchor point is centered again. It always seems to jump off to the side. I'm not sure why. So that looks centered there. And just bring up our example again. So as it gets to its position here, the F and the I, it looks like it shoots up and then lands just as all the other letters are finishing their little bounce in. So let's move to where we want it to finish, which is roughly, let's say here. Press P and make a keyframe. Let's go back to where we want it to start. That's roughly, let's say here. Move it down. And then in between these 2 keyframes, we want it to go right up in the air. So maybe not as high as that, maybe to here. So go up, land. So go up in the air and back down to land in its final position. So let's select all 3 keyframes. Right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease. And on this middle keyframe, if you go to our graph editor, we want it to be really slow. So we want it to sort of slowed down like gravity's affecting it, slowing it down before it comes back down. And on this first keyframe, we want it to sort of shoot like it's kind of been shot out of cannon, so to gather its higher speed quite quick. Let's just see how that looks. We don't want it visible before, so let's just again move the start point to here. That's not too bad. I'm just going to stretch these keyframes out slightly just because it's going a bit quick. That's not too bad. So what we do want it to do is, just before it comes into position here, we want it to go further past than it needs to, as if it's sort of like bouncing into position. So I'm just going to copy this last keyframe, move forward slightly, and paste. Let's go back to this second to last keyframe, and let's just move it down to here, just so it's sort of just touching the top of the eye before it bounces back up to its final position. Okay, I'm just going to close the gap between those final two slightly and move them both left a couple of frames. Actually, it looks better when they're 3 frames apart. 1, 2, 3, or 4 even. Let's go back into the graph editor. This final one, let's just have that ease in. Yeah, okay, I think that's looking quite good. So the only thing left, if you go back to our example, is this R symbol in the top right, which sort of just rolls into position as if it's being pulled by that F. So let's just do that quickly. I'm going to grab our text tool, and I think it's Alt or Option. Alt on the Mac, Option on the PC. If you hold that and press R, I think that creates that. Yes, it does. If we just highlight this and go to Character and click this symbol here, that will make it a superscript, so it just goes a bit smaller in the top corner. Let's just move that into position, which is roughly up here. Let's move our anchor point to the center again. Click off. Let's go to here. That's roughly when it will be finished. Go to here, press R on the keyboard, hold Shift and P. So these are the two properties we want to keyframe. Keyframe both of these. Let's move back to where the F, just before it starts to move. So here, let's move its position all the way to the right here. Same with the rotation. Let's go 90. Let's highlight all these keyframes. Keyframe Assistant. Easy ease. Let's select the last two, go to our graph editor. Let's have them ease in, but we don't really want much easing out. We want it to sort of move quite quickly at the start. Just see how that looks. Oh, that is way too quick. So let's move these out roughly here, just so it's a lot slower. Back to our graph editor. Maybe it's going too slow at the end. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that's looking good. So let's just move the very start of this layout to here so you can't see it before again. And there we go. I'll actually move this just so it's a bit closer. Yeah. Move these across a bit. I think it's a bit too slow now. And there we go. I'm just going to turn off our guide layer that we have, just so it's just our text and the background. Let's play this through. Let's move that more into the middle. There we go. And that is the end of the tutorial. If you enjoyed the tutorial, please don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments and I'll be happy to answer them. But for now, thanks for watching and I'll see you soon.